To pick up from where we were yesterday, just those 3 key themes, and I'm going to, on the fly, add a 4th. Complexity, how complex these stories are, and you could also say how interrelated they are. How many times in each of the sessions, and it will happen again today, do we hear some of the same terminology? Do we struggle over things like, what's the right language? The question not only of migrant versus refugee, but also questions of, people used to say traditional media and new media, and very few people say that anymore. But what's the right terminology? It's very complex. Slow is the new fast. That's a sort of complex concept. Respect, we heard this in a very big way in several of our sessions yesterday, particularly in the session on hate speech, on queer sensibilities, and of course from our speaker from Afghanistan, Shukriya Barakzai. The last one here is creativity. We're going to hear a lot about creativity today, but not in the sense of here's a new gadget, you need to use it. Here's a partnership with a 9-year-old in California that you need to do immediately. That's not really the definition of creativity. It'll be just as much about how we work, how we approach work, how we interact with our colleagues, how we choose partners to work with, and how we establish working relationships with them, as well as some interesting new kids on the block, if you will. And the 4th one that I would add to this that's not on the board, underlying everything really, is this humanitarianism, the human approach to storytelling that we've heard so much about, whether it's showing the very quick vox pops filmed here in Berlin with young people born in 1989 or 1990, or whether it's hearing one person's story or seeing Mustafa Jacob's images that were very touching and very moving. So those are really the key themes that will underlie everything. All of that, and I'm struggling to kind of put it into words because the way of tying all of it together is to say, well, how do we go from these concepts to put them into our organizations? How do you take, and let's take as an example, an old and highly respected newspaper like, for example, the New York Times, where I began my news career. How do you take an institution like that, and the very word institution kind of suggests something, and how do you arrive into the digital age? And what are some of the massive cultural shifts that will move a newspaper, if you will, into the digital age? When I first started working for the Times, the then very young publisher Arthur Sulzberger Jr. made a radical announcement, this was like in 1987, that said, and imagine, this is before the internet even, he said, we're not about newspapers, we're about journalism. And he made that distinction nearly 30 years ago and has guided and moved that paper and that media organization in that direction. Last spring of 2014, a report was leaked. It later became publicly available. We have, because it's publicly available, we printed a copy for every single one of our delegates. It was in your delegate bag. It's a copy of the New York Times Innovation Report, something that the Nieman Lab has called one of the most important documents of the digital age. It's a guide to how to move an organization and put in those cultural shifts that are so important. We're very, very lucky today to have with us one of the co-authors of that report, who will talk to us about it. He is the senior international video correspondent and deputy editor for the New York Times. In 2009, he was the first reporter to bring us a documentary and story of Malala. He is a very gifted journalist and somebody who can give us a lot of insights and ideas about what it actually means to bring creativity and innovation into a very old and well-respected and entrenched media organization like the New York Times. Please join me in welcoming our opening keynote speaker for today, Adam Ellick.
I know when to go out, know when to stay in, get things done.
Thank you and good morning. I spent about the past 15 years traveling around the world telling stories in maybe 70 or 80 countries. And strangely, I'm here today to tell you about arguably the most boring year of my life, during which I was confined to a white-walled conference room with a bunch of dry erase markers and some Post-it notes. Somehow that became interesting. The document is 96 pages long. I researched and co-wrote it with about 10 colleagues, and it took us about 6 months to produce. But before I get into the details, I would like to tell you a bit about how I ended up in that room. This is about 15 years ago. I started as a freelance newspaper reporter, living in Eastern Europe and then Russia, and finally making my way to Indonesia. That's when I was trying to cross a river in Banda Aceh after the tsunami when I was living in Jakarta. Now, I love writing, and I started as a newspaper and magazine writer, but I felt that words just sometimes didn't cut it, and I wanted to reinvent myself. I wanted new tools to share all the incredible things that I was seeing, so I joined the Times, and I taught myself on weekends how to shoot and edit video. And I'm glad I did, because I met some pretty remarkable people once I went overseas. That's me in 2009, first reporting on this unknown schoolgirl, and I ended up bringing her story to the world in a 2009 film called Class Dismissed. It's a good thing I learned some of those new tools, because this is some of the only intimate footage in the world of Malala before she was shot by the Taliban. Later that night, we sat down on the floor for dinner.
No, please sit. If once again you are ordered officially that you leave the city and go away, what will you do? You will only, just like last time, you will just cry, and you will pick up your bag and baggage with your father, and you will leave this city? You will resist to some extent. What do you think?
So I will leave.
You will leave the city. Why?
Because they can kill us.
After what you've been through in these 3 months, you would never leave again? I'm asking you the question that you asked your daughter.
I can't say anything. It's quite a difficult question. Not so simple.
So after this film and after Arab Spring, I took a year off to gain some more new skills and studied disruptive innovation in social TV. And when I returned to the Times, I heard about this new innovation team that was forming. Our initial goal was to try to reinvent the next big thing, even though we didn't really know what that was. And we quickly came to the conclusion that a one-hit wonder is not what is truly needed. We came to the conclusion that real change comes from looking within and trying to rethink and reinvent the core of our newsroom. We tried to ask difficult questions and to challenge assumptions, like a 900-word story, which we've been doing for decades, if not longer. And to ask questions about norms, like copy editors write headlines, to find out why that happened and what value does that have in a new world when headlines have a different value. If we were a TV station, we would probably have asked different but similar questions, such as, what is the purpose of a green screen in an era when authenticity has increased value? What is the purpose of a weather report when most viewers have a phone in their hand and can find this information out very easily and faster on their own? Pretty soon, as our research went underway, we realized one really important thing. Our business is changing really fast. Now, this is a snapshot of just some of the headlines that happened during the 6 months that we researched this report. BuzzFeed, which was once known for cat videos, had suddenly launched an investigative unit. And Business Insider, which, by the way, didn't exist when I first joined the Times, had surpassed the Journal in traffic. These headlines are now 2 years old, but they feel like they're from the Stone Age. But you know who's moving even faster than our industry? It's our readers. Some of you may have seen this. St. Peter's Square, 2005. It's the funeral of Pope John Paul II. This is the same place 8 years later. It's the first appearance of Pope Francis. And if you look closely in the bottom right-hand corner of 2005, you can see a flip phone. We have a word for those people, or 2 words, early adopters. This chart from our innovation report generated a ton of attention. It's the decline of the almighty homepage. It's probably old news by now. Now, if you think about the homepage, it's a finite amount of space. And if you sat in on our news meetings, say 2 years ago, you would have seen editors competing for this precious space. But we now live in an era where you can promote and distribute all stories across all sorts of different platforms to different people. Readers are finding new and different ways to access our journalism. Check out our explosive growth on mobile. This year, more than 60% of traffic came from a smartphone or a tablet. 60%. And half of our audience is now mobile only. For the past 20 years, we've been trying to get used to a very uncomfortable fact. The next generation of readers will never pick up a newspaper. But now we have a new challenge. The next generation might never visit us on a desktop. The web needed maybe 20 years to disrupt the news industry, and mobile has disrupted desktop in just a few years. Here's the challenge. It's a classic disruption story. The platform in decline is print, and it still generates the overwhelming majority of revenue. And the growth is in digital. Our challenge is transforming a 165-year-old paper into a digital company. It's a journalistic challenge, it's a cultural challenge, it's a technological challenge, and it's a financial challenge. Sometimes it makes me want to quit journalism. But when we get it right, it's pretty exciting, and it can look like this. Now, it's a great time to be a journalist. I can reach more readers than any previous generation of reporters. So we came together to produce this report. And we did it, to be honest, the only way we know how to do anything. We launched an investigation into the Times itself. The report was fundamentally about 2 things: audience development and digital-first culture. And I'll break both of those things down in a moment. But first, as mentioned, many of you know this report was meant to be secret, and it was leaked. It was written for 6 top editors, and now it has been downloaded more than 2 million times. The irony of this distribution is not lost on us. It was our scoop, our company, our reporters, and BuzzFeed brought it to the world. We've since heard of companies from South Korea to Sweden commissioning their own innovation reports. And people often ask us, why did this gain so much attention? Some people have even referred to it as a no-duh document. We think many newspapers and media outlets were surprised to learn that the Times is facing the same universal challenges that exist in their newsrooms. How did we do it? We interviewed 350 people at 50 companies, and not just newspapers and tech startups, but also venture capitalists. One of my favorite interviews was with a credit card company, when I learned how they nurture loyalty among cardholders. I spent the first few weeks just interviewing news junkies and subscribers and non-subscribers. We invaded their homes as they woke up, cradling an iPad in their pajamas. It was one of the most creepy moments of my life, but I learned something. By the end, it became clear that no one has solved the media business. No one's figured out journalism in the digital age. But different players have solved pieces of the problem. BuzzFeed, they have mastered the art of social sharing. The FT radically refocused hiring, digital hiring. And The Guardian has built a cohesive community around its content. The Times figured out a pay model. We made a bet on our readers and decided to make more investments in journalism. Our metered paywall has worked nicely for us. We have found 2.1 million subscribers to our journalism. And because readers pay for our journalism, we avoid the race to the bottom, which is chasing clicks, not serious reporting. The bottom of the internet is a really crowded place. But quality journalism alone is no longer enough. That brings us to audience development, or the art and science of reaching more readers with our journalism. Over the past year, we built a large audience team in the newsroom. And although we're focused on the long term, we've seen some amazing immediate gains. Digital readership up by 1/4. Social referrals have nearly doubled. More importantly, editors and reporters are thinking actively about their audiences. There's no silver bullet. But what does exist is a menu of ways to reach new people. Now we are asking questions like how to use geo-targeting. What is our email newsletter strategy? And how does Instagram differ from WeChat? And how do we staff and structure accordingly for that opportunity? It used to be that we would press the publish or print button and sit back and enjoy the impact of Times journalism. Today, the story begins when we hit the publish button. Audience development is actually something news organizations have been doing for a really long time, if you think about it. We literally print out a newspaper every single night, load them onto trucks and drive them across America, and then hand them to boys who peddle them to the front doors of our readers and subscribers. It's a pretty amazing feat, and it looks like this around the world.
All around the world, home newspaper delivery is an impressive feat. In India, men on bikes can throw a newspaper right into your 5th floor walk-up.
You're watching extreme newspaper delivery.
And closer to home, the process of home delivery can be a dangerous task.
Yikes. I don't know if you can see this, how crazy this really is. This is just dangerous. All to get to that little guy right there. All to put it in this box right here.
I apologize to all the Scandinavians in the room who are probably thinking that's not a very dangerous road and there's almost no ice there. The big point here is that we need to modernize audience development in the digital age. We can no longer rely on people finding our stories. Our stories need to find people. So I'm often asked, okay, what does this mean in real life? Fortunately, I'm a reporter, so I can answer that question. A few months after our report came out, I co-produced and wrote this story called Surviving an ISIS Massacre.
ولا تمتد إليه يد سوء إلا
هذا أنا متأكد منه 100%، مو بس 100%، مليون بالمية، لأن إحنا هذول مجموعتنا المتشتفين وهذاك الكرفان اللي طالع من عنده شوية.
In June, ISIS militants massacred hundreds of army recruits. This is the improbable story of Ali Kazem, the only known survivor.
This is the type of journalism we're proud of, and I wanted to make sure that it would reach the most amount of people possible. So here's what we did. We assembled a team across 8 departments that had never previously worked together, from marketing to social media to data analytics. And we produced the first ever bilingual video on our platforms. We made socially native media assets like trailers and bilingual copy, and we targeted an international audience in their time zones, on their platforms, and in their languages. We secured pre-launch commitments beforehand from non-traditional partners like the Young Turks, and we identified influencers. These are people with large followings on social media and who are passionate about this topic, and we told them, this is coming, and we think you might be interested. Certainly, this required a bunch of resources, but the results were off the charts. In 3 days, Survivor blanketed the social web, becoming the most streamed video of the year for the Times. Remember my point earlier about the decline of the homepage? Only 12% of streams came from the Times' own assets, and only 5% from the homepage. International audiences, more omnipresent, more mobile, and far more likely to be new visitors to our site. We built long-term loyalty as well. The tweets from this story alone generated a 6% increase in the total number of followers to the Times Video account. But we all know that journalists like to spin numbers to fit their story, and I'm certainly guilty of that. So when you arm journalists with numbers, they don't always know what to do with them. 88% referral traffic. Sounds great. What do I do with that? When we talk about analytics, which can be controversial in some newsrooms, we're not just talking page views. We're much more interested in engagement. Are we reaching people, the right people, at the right times? As a storyteller, I can tell you that I am most interested in completion rate. That tells me if my narrative is effective. Click rate just lets me know if someone was interested to give it a try, mostly a function of promotion. Over the past year, we've built an analytics team right in the heart of our newsroom. We've upgraded our tools, embedded data scientists who now sit beside journalists, and we've expanded access to data across the newsroom. And one thing we learned is that our readers love serious journalism. In the last 6 months of 2013, the Times saw more than 14 million page views of our coverage of the war on Syria. No clickbait there, just serious journalism. When we wrote the report, we didn't set out to create a roadmap of innovation in the newsroom. We wanted to change the Times to become the kind of place where innovation can happen continuously. We don't want to have to write another innovation report in 5 years to catch up. Being digital first means print is simply no longer the beginning of the conversation. It's often the end. In the past year, since the report came out, past year and a half, we've made 3 big changes. We've created a newsroom strategy team. We've prioritized the hiring and promotion of digital talent. And we've worked to bring the newsroom and the business side closer together. It used to be, once upon a time, that a newspaper editor only had to worry about this, the newspaper. Nowadays, there are so many different platforms for distributing our stories, and they're changing all the time. When you're the editor-in-chief worrying about the front page, how can you make a thoughtful, well-researched decision on how to best use your archive? How to best use structured data? That's what we mean when we say strategy. These questions about the support systems around our journalism are really difficult. And we think there should be experts in-house who think about them on a full-time basis, not once a year at a conference in a lovely city like Berlin. We also need to hire digital makers, not just digital decision makers, and we should recruit them with the same vigor that we do investigative journalists and editors. These are the superstars behind the scenes, the people that make the stuff that isn't on the front page every day. Interactive designers, coders, and product managers. Traditionally, newsrooms and business sides did not talk to each other. The newsroom worried about reporting, and the business side sold ads. And by the way, let's not forget that worked really well for a long time. But that wall is no longer in the right place. These teams in the middle have one thing in common. They're reader-focused. This includes producers, product people, customer insights, research, and development teams. These teams think about getting our journalism in front of more people, and there's no conflict of interest there. There's a joke that we refer to them in the newsroom as Switzerland because they're neutral, in case you were wondering why there was a Swiss flag up top. When we started in 1851, you couldn't get the Times in New Jersey, let alone in the rest of the world. Now we're trying to reach Portuguese speakers in Angola. I was recently there for a few weeks making a film about child mortality, and we partnered with a paper in Portugal in order to reach readers in Angola and ended up outputting an audio version to disseminate in rural parts of Angola. I'm trying to reach 17-year-olds on YouTube who have probably never read the Times. Innovation doesn't mean creating something new every day. It means changing the culture so you are comfortable trying the uncomfortable, iterating when you succeed and learning when you fail. And for us, the most satisfying cultural change has been the conversation, the change in conversation. Questions turn from why should I care to how can I help? But it's important to note that as much as things have changed, they also stay the same. We have almost the exact number of reporters as we did in 2000. Although during this time, we have built out an army of graphics, video, computer-assisted, and social journalists. We continue to invest in prized reporting and support our journalists with the costs associated with safety. Our reporters have taken 4,500 commercial flights this year because we believe the only way to do the kind of journalism we want to do is to get on an airplane and go and witness these events. And sometimes when commercial flights aren't available, we find other ways to get there. This is just a few of the ways that reporters have told us that they have traveled in the past year. We have filed stories from 150 countries this year, and as our news ecosystem shifts, people are starting to reward quality again. And that's why having a global footprint and journalistic expertise, reporters who are doctors and lawyers covering medicine and law, is so important. Protecting what we've always done requires us to embrace the change of how we do it. That is the exercise that the Times and the whole industry is going through right now. These are the recommendations from the Innovation Report. All 5 have happened, and now we're trying to professionalize them, to improve on them, so we can be ready for the next big disruption, like the Apple Watch. Just a few days after Apple introduced the watch, they did not give our mobile team a watch to play with, but they gave us a challenge: news on the phone. And our mobile team knew it wouldn't be enough to just take headlines from the homepage and slap them on a watch. They wouldn't even fit, of course. We might have done that a few years ago, but instead, post-Innovation Report, we formed a team of journalists, designers, and coders, and they sat together to do something more ambitious. They created something brand new, which we call one-sentence stories. These are short little stories designed to catch you up quickly. It turns out to be incredibly difficult to do journalism on a 4-centimeter screen. And there's a joke in the newsroom that we hope Arnold Schwarzenegger never makes the news again. Anyway, the project forced us to think about the user and the user's needs. Someone looking at this watch doesn't have a long time before his or her arm gets tired. Users want to get caught up quickly. And given how personal the device is, we wanted to write in a more informal way, the way you would talk to a friend. Now the watch has been out and our app is out, and readers love it. People are actually sending us photos of their wrist. One reader emailed us and said, quote, "You created an app that I wanted before I knew I wanted it." So maybe that is the future, or the next frontier of journalism, predicting the future. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes for a couple questions, if there are any.
Yep, there's one over there.
Yes, sir.
Hello, João Assunção from SIC in Portugal. I'd like to know as to Malala, when you met her, when you first met her, did you feel somehow that doing a documentary with her could put her life in danger? And I'd like also to know how did you manage to convince the only survivor from ISIS attack to talk to you? And the same question, was it also danger for him to speak to you? His life was not in danger doing that? Thank you.
You're supposed to ask about that white-walled conference room that we talked about in the beginning. No, I'm thrilled to answer questions about my reporting. There were extensive conversations with Malala's father before the documentary even went into production, with my fixer, with her father, with my editors in New York over and over again. And at that time in SWAT, civil society activists like her father, who was a sort of vocal proponent of girls' education and owns a school, were, were being targeted. The main square was renamed Slaughter Square. But almost everyone who was targeted was male and was really outspoken. So those conversations centered almost exclusively on the safety of her father. It never occurred to any of us that a schoolgirl would be targeted. At that time, there were over 100 girls' schools that were bombed, but almost every single one of them was bombed at nighttime. So children, and especially girls, were just sort of not part of the conversation of people who were in danger. And for your second question, I would encourage you to watch the story of Survivor. The young man who survived recounts a very specific scene during which someone helped him reach safety, a man who ended up dying. And before that man died, he said to him, "Make sure you tell everyone what has happened to us." So Ali, the survivor, was, he was actually eager to share his story, and he felt some sort of moral obligation to share his story based on that conversation with the gentleman who he said saved his life. Yes.
Thank you. Anthony Edgar, International Olympic Committee. I actually got two questions, if I may, but the first one is, could you explain the Facebook relationship and how that is working? And then secondly, the video news side. I mean, in your report, you don't really cover how important the video side is to the text story. And could you explain how important that is? And then why newspaper organisations are not really pushing so much for fair dealings across the use of video material within the newspaper environment. It's happening sporadically, but there's no cross-platform news access in a sense. Great.
So that was 3 questions, not 2. And I'm being... So I'm around all day and happy to chat about these issues on the sidelines, but I'll take the first one because I'm told that we're almost out of time. So I feel like we're in a pretty lucky place because we are a subscription journalism company, and the core relationship is with those 2.1 million subscribers. But we also know that our relationship with potential subscribers begins off-platform. So we would be crazy to sort of curl up and put 100% of our efforts into those subscribers. So Facebook to us is sort of one of many places off-platform where we can begin to put our journalism in front of people who are not current subscribers. And equally important, it's a place to have a public voice, which is a huge part of what we do every day, and to be included in that debate. So I think sort of having a presence off-platform, but yet also knowing that the fundamental primary business model is sort of serving up subscription journalism service are not necessarily mutually exclusive, although it's a delicate balance and a constant conversation. Very quickly on your video question, I mean, we haven't figured it out yet. We're asking these questions every day, and to what degree is video baked into the print process? To what degree is video untethered from the print process, and does it stand on its own? I think there is a potential model in the way that our graphics department was born 15 years ago and has professionalized over that time. It can stand alone. It makes sensational, award-winning, prized graphics journalism, which often does not need a print component. And other times it will serve a text story and create something that adds value to 900 words. And that is a tension that, is sort of solved every day on a story-to-story basis. And the way, video, if those headlines seem fast in 2 years, video, needs a whole new set of industry-changing headlines every 2 to 3 months. So your question is one that we're asking every day. Thank you so much.